Today, we're talking about a company that is, and I'm not exaggerating here, one of the most important companies in the entire world. And yet, I'd bet most people have never, ever heard its name. That company is ASML. So let me ask you this straight up. If you had to name this single most critical company for the future of tech, who comes to mind? You might say Apple, maybe NVIDIA, or even Google. But what if I told you there's another company that all of them, and I mean all of them, depend on entirely? Well, the answer really boils down to this one single number, 100%. That's the market share that this Dutch company, ASML, has in a technology called extreme ultraviolet lithography. And look, these aren't just any machines. These are the machines, the only things on Earth that can make the most advanced computer chips, the ones powering your phone, and yeah, the whole AI revolution. What this all means is that ASML is what's known as a choke point. It is the single point of failure. I mean, think about that for a second. If ASML just stopped tomorrow, the world's production of cutting-edge chips would completely grind to a halt. It's an absolutely mind-boggling amount of power for one company to hold. Honestly, it's kind of terrifying. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get a handle on their invisible monopoly. Then, the three key pillars that built their empire. We'll dive into their massive high-end gamble. And finally, you get to be the judge. Let's get into it. All right, first up, the invisible monopoly. So just how dominant are we really talking here? What does this all look like on paper? Just check out these numbers from 2024. Yeah, almost $31 billion in revenue. That's huge. But that's not the crazy part. Look at that gross margin, over 51%. For a company that actually makes hardware, that is just unheard of. That is the kind of number you only get when you can name your price and your customers have literally no other option but to pay it. And this is where their business model gets really smart. Sure, they make a ton selling the new machines. That's 78%. But look at that other 22%. That's all service and upgrades. It's the classic razor and blade play, right? You sell the super expensive razor, and then you've got them hooked on buying the blades for years and years. It creates this incredibly stable, predictable river of cash. So how in the world did they pull this off? You don't just stumble into a monopoly this perfect. It was built, piece by piece, on a few incredibly bold and risky decisions. Let's break down these three masterstrokes. So here's our roadmap. We're going to look at how they shared the risk back in 2012, how they took ownership of the light in 2013, and how right now they're betting on the future. Three huge moves. Okay, let's start with that first pillar because it's a wild story. Back around 2012, developing this EUV tech was a money pit. We're talking so expensive, it was on the verge of sinking the entire company. So they had to get creative, and they came up with an absolutely genius move. So what did they do? They went to their biggest customers, the giants, Intel, TSMC, Samsung, and they convinced them to not just help fund R&D, but to actually buy a piece of the company. It was brilliant. Not only did it spread out that massive financial risk, but it also locked everyone in. Suddenly, their customers' success was tied directly to ASML's success.
But throwing money at the problem wasn't enough. There was this huge technical hurdle that was about to kill the whole project. The issue was the light source. I mean, the way these things work is just insane. They vaporize tiny droplets of tin with a laser to create plasma. But the light simply wasn't powerful enough. They couldn't make chips fast enough for it to be profitable.
And this is where everything changed. See, they were relying on an outside supplier, a company called Cymer, for this key piece of tech. When progress stalled, ASML just bought them for $2.5 billion. It was a massive power move. They went from a company that puts pieces together to owning the single most difficult part of the machine. And that's what finally let them crack the code. So you'd think after building this unbeatable empire, they'd just sit back and count the money, right? Nope. In fact, they're doing the exact opposite. They are making their biggest, most audacious bet yet on a new machine that will make their current cash cow obsolete. And just look at the scale of this gamble. Their current EUV machine, a cool $160 million. The new one, this high-NA beast, it's going to be around $380 million per machine. That is a mind-blowing jump in price, and it's all in the name of getting down to that next frontier of 2-nanometer chips. So how do they afford a bet this big? By just relentlessly feeding the beast. They pour about 15% of their revenue every single year back into R&D. That is more than double what a normal hardware company spends. It's like they're in a constant race against themselves.
and they're funding both sides.
There's actually a name for this. It's a cannibalization strategy. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? Why would you kill your own golden goose? Well, the logic is simple. If someone's going to make your product obsolete, it had better be you. By jumping to the next big thing, they slam the door shut on any potential competitor before they can even get a foot in.
Which brings us to our final section, and this is where you come in. We've seen how ASML built this fortress, but with this latest move, have they finally pushed things too far? Has the pure physics of innovation finally crashed head-on into the laws of economics?
So this is really the core dilemma, the high-stakes choice they're making. You can either cannibalize your own product, proactively kill your cash cow to stay on top, basically funding the future of Moore's Law all by yourself. Or you can wait. You can let your rivals try to find a cheaper, good enough way of doing things and risk losing everything you've built. And that really boils down to the one question that everyone in the chip world is asking right now. At nearly $400 million a pop, have they built a machine that's just too expensive? Is there a breaking point where even their biggest customers just have to say, you know what, we can't afford this anymore? So I'm turning it over to you. What do you think? Is this move an act of pure strategic genius that locks in their monopoly for another decade? Or is it a high-stakes gamble that has finally pushed the price of progress past what the market can actually sustain? It's a huge question, and the answer might just decide the future of technology as we know it.